Innovation in mobility. The future of mobility panel discussion supported by many participants. Bence, Buday, Wallis, Autómegosztó Kft. Managing Director. Dr. Róbert Keszte, Continental Automotive Hungary Managing Director, Continental Group Head of Country. Balázs Németh, BMW Group Hungary Mini Brand Manager. Dr. István Szálszí, Head of the Porsche Group in Hungary and the Adria region, and Budapest Development Center Head. Moderator Zoltán Borbély, Schiller Flotta Kft. Managing Director, Board Member of the Hungarian Association of Executives. Hi everyone, wish you good morning and then so good afternoon, and then mobility is quite an exciting topic, and we are lucky because we don't have to touch upon everything in this 30-minute discussion. I think that we are in a very exciting period from that aspect, because Bence actually requested me to use the KSM service, and then I wanted to come here by electric car, by a taxi that is electric car, and then when I received the answer that, well, there's no electric car available as a taxi, so do I want to still use their services, the taxi company services? So actually it seems that the mobility is there, but what do you think? It's demand or supply that is changing? What is your opinion? Who should start? The eldest. Anyway, so both are changing. We actually operating a car sharing company, so I think it's more easier for us to speak about the supply side, but of course on the demand side there are changes and regulatory changes as well. There are a couple of things that you have to understand. So now we are talking about car mobility. So if the difference is clear between how we were using our cars 20 years ago and we are using them now, and then the change will be even faster in the next 5 years to come. So what kind of cars we are going to drive, who will drive them? So I think the changes therefore will take place both on the supply side and the demand side. Okay, I came by a hybrid taxi. I was lucky because I didn't order it to be like that. But coming back to your question about whether it's supply or demand that is changing, let me give you a figure about how demand changes. So not the demand for mobility, but if we look at year 2015 as a base year, then 50,000 billion customer kilometer was run. And in 2030 or in 2050, forecasts say that the 50,000 billion customer kilometer will go up to 80,000 billion customer kilometers, and in 2030, and 120,000 billion customer kilometer by 2050. It's just, it doesn't include freight transport, but anything else that includes mobility, like from scooters through motorbikes through to cars. So the reason why it's important to stress is that it will be an over 2 times increase. So it's not necessarily cars that will be required, but the demand will increase for mobility as such. But mobility, as I told you, includes everything from scooters through to e-bike and any other extreme vehicles that can help people get from point A to B. And one more thing, let me mention why we think these demands will change. Usually we talk about external factors, and one of them, or two of them in actual fact, will be how transportation changes in cities. Well, there is a traffic jam all the time, so it means that we have to adapt our customs. And the second example is that if you look at generation Y and Z, then they do not necessarily want to possess a car, but they want to be mobile in any other way. And then car sharing is a service that they would be ready to use. They want to use their mobile phones and order a car shared by someone else. So changes are there on the demand side because of some environmental aspects and some internal human aspects as well. Well, how can your company adjust to that? Not only changes are there in demand on the demand and supply side alike, but also we have to, as car companies, align them. So 5 to 10 years ahead, we have to make plans, and actually demand can change all of a sudden, even from 1 month to another. And who would have dared to think about those many changes that have taken place in the past 2 years, for instance? And actually, the solutions we offer cannot precede the demand of society, and the other way around. It's also true that we cannot satisfy a demand that we didn't start planning for 10 years ago. Well, I'm not going to use figures to illustrate why mobility is the future, but from the aspect of the need of society, because mobility is a very important thing for society. That gives you the feeling of freedom, and then it's not going to decrease, but increase all the time, and that will provide the basis for those future figures that István has mentioned, and we hope that in our industry we can serve that. Well, as to the question about whether it's supply or demand that will dictate the future development, well, the answer is that demand has always been the same for the past couple of thousands of years, moving from point A to B, fastest, cheapest, most convenient way, and so on. So it hasn't changed. So this is the demand side, and we are trying to satisfy this demand side, and we try to offer services that are getting closer to these demands. So the technological solutions we use will dictate at what cost level we can enter technology on the market. But as my colleagues mentioned, there should be a balance between demand and supply. And in order for us to be able to speak about the future, let us talk about the current situation. What are the challenges currently that you have to tackle in order to go towards the future that you are assuming right now? And so maybe from a technological manufacturer point of view, if we could start answering this question. Well, listening to the previous presentations, I think they have already covered all the challenges ahead of us. But as a company executive, ahead of us is how to handle the complexity of those many changes that are taking place, because now there are so many events taking place that you couldn't foretell to come, so that we, company executives, will have to be able to address them and channel these changes into our organizations, and it will remain to be a requirement in future as well. As far as technology is concerned, I think the biggest change that we can see in the automotive industry is that the hardware-based cars will be shifted towards software-based cars. So what will dictate technology will not be hardware so much than software. And it means that we have to reflect this change in approach in our car portfolios and product portfolios, and this is the challenge that we are working on day by day.
In this changing environment, The unsecurity of regulations is also an issue. So the direction and the speed can be determined by the regulator fundamentally. And our experience in terms of urban mobility, shared vehicles, etc. So for a long time, there has been a long discussion, but there is no set road or path. And the longer it takes for this road or path to be set, the more expensive it's going to be. Or if it's being set towards the wrong direction because the wrong drive chain was chosen, etc., that's once again a disadvantage for the whole development process. So as a shared mobility service provider, I can say that this unclear vision and this uncertainty really translates to the developers, to the financer, to the company service providers, because they have to finance the prolonged decision-making process. We found a lot of new questions. Well, let me reflect on the manufacturer side. I think we don't have to regulate everything. So now we believe in the diversification of technology, and I think it is technology that is ultimately going to make the decision. I do understand what you meant when you talked about regulation, but why do we say that not necessarily everything has to be regulated? So if you think about drive chains, and if we think about the paradigm shift in this regard that has taken place over the past years, there's the eternal question whether it's fully electric, battery electric vehicles, or hydrogen-driven. I don't think. I mean, our opinion is that we don't have to decide. Because one technology, the battery electric vehicle, is entirely suited to treat local emissions. So we can include this drive chain in a small car, and we can drive from point A to B within the city. But based on today's technology, it's not necessarily sure that, for example, in the US, where trucks make roads or distances of 2,000 miles, it's unlikely that they will be able to use these battery electric vehicles. But for them, it would be entirely suitable to have hydrogen fuel cells. And in that case, they could drive from point A to B with just one filling occasion and bringing the products from logistics center A to B. So I think it's very important to maintain technological diversity, and it shouldn't be us, customers or politicians or decision makers, to decide which drive chain will take over. I think it's going to be the methods, the use cases that will decide which ones will be efficient economically and sustainably and which should be introduced. That's very important. Yes, it's so important that we will talk about this in more detail in the coming panel discussions as well. And in terms of challenges, what are the most burning issues for you? So in the automotive industry, we talk about 4 megatrends, really independent of the company or of one's position in the supply chain. So one megatrend is the automation or autonomous driving, electromobility, personalized services, and then connectivity is the 4th one. Bosch as a group, as a global group, and Bosch Hungary is active in 2 megatrends in autonomous cars and electromobility. So if we focus a little bit on Hungary, then I think these are the 2 major challenges, which are actually exciting technological areas in all respects. And I think these are the fields where we see the most patents, the most innovations that are partially already included in our lives. We may not know about it, or that will soon be in our lives. For example, thinking about artificial intelligence, which within a couple of years and perhaps without even the driver's knowledge, will be able, for example, detect pedestrians. So this definitely will rely on AI. So in the Budapest Development Center, which employs almost 3,000 developers working on these megatrends, so these are the topics that we deal with. So if you're already turning towards the future, how is the customer experience going to change? So if the trends do adapt, if we can adapt, what is going to be the change in terms of consumer experience? I'm happy to continue, but I don't want to take the floor from the colleagues. Well, thank you. So in terms of customer experience, we are obviously in a special segment in premium cars. For us, the customer experience relies on the assumption that the most valuable asset in the future is going to be time. So therefore, everything we do is to make sure that driving from point A to B is not just getting from A to B, but for it to be an experience, whether it's a shared service that we use or public transportation. So this is a very, very important aspect for us. I think, yes, the customer experience goes beyond the experience of the car itself. So if we bought a car, so that's the experience. When we start the car, turn on the engine, then the speed, the roaring of the engine. But then we see that all the technologies are being connected, for example, our smartphones, and from then on, from here on, the customer experience does no longer start when we turn on the engine, but when we start using the service, what analysis I can see, how I get to the car itself or how the car comes to me. So it goes far, far beyond the experience of traveling itself. And the more expanded or extended this customer experience is, the more organizations will be included in the process. So service providers will be linked in, telecommunication service providers, financial providers, etc. So until now, the time you spend in a car was a blank period because you couldn't use the phone. But the more connected the car will be, the more connected it will be to the manufacturer, to the service providers, the more knowledge we will have or more information we will have on the opportunities of the car, of the time spent in a car. Yes, I think this is where things come together. So the customer experience really depends on what customers are willing to pay for. So the new architecture, new software-based constructions allow for turning on certain services, certain functions, either temporarily or for longer periods. And obviously this opens up new possibilities in our lives and a new era. And we manufacturers have to prepare for manufacturing commodity type of cars, and then it's going to be the mobility service providers who will operate these systems in a way that they meet the requirements of the customers. What is your take in terms of partnership? Does this enhance cooperation between the actors of the industry? Well, if we go back in the history of automotive industry a little bit, maybe 10 to 15 years, then we see that there was a very different way of operating the value chain. So it was a rather separated chain. Everybody had their own responsibilities, suppliers, manufacturers, and these responsibilities weren't really washed together. So we could really see what suppliers took part in, the car manufacturers, car manufacturing, how they depended on each other, etc. And I think This complexity has really increased. The supplier network has become much more complex. The automotive industry itself has become much more complex because we now have component suppliers who earlier on were only semiconductor suppliers providing chips. And these companies started moving towards the direction of developing softwares. And actually they deliver complete control units and started developing these. The same goes for automotive industrial companies. They no longer stick with the traditional assembly activity, buying the individual parts and putting them together. They also started developing and taking part in these megatrends. So we see a huge challenge. Everybody's looking for their own place in this new complex world, how they can shift from the classical value creation and make profit or set a foot in the new value creation era. And what you said with the technology, we don't really know which, you said we don't know which technology is going to win, and now we don't know about, for example, typically hardware companies who over the past 20, 30 years manufactured and developed hardware, how they will turn into software companies, or how software companies will turn into system suppliers who will no longer only provide the software itself, but the electronics that go hand in hand with that. I think this sort of distorts the balance in the industry a little bit, and I think now the industry is looking for a new equilibrium, and now this is also complemented with a bit of political uncertainty, which is not only a result of the Ukrainian war, but is something that has been present for the past 2 years. So I think this is a very exciting period for all companies. I think a very interesting impact of electric vehicles is the fact that there are new entrants, new market entrants, for example, not only from China. So if you go, for example, to a fair, you will see a lot of brands of which we've never heard, not only because they are Chinese, but because perhaps a year ago they did not even exist yet. So there are actors that are entering the market of whom we would not have thought about 10 years ago, not so long ago. I saw a Norwegian example. So, for example, for a Chinese car, 1,000 pre-orders were submitted without even having seen the car. So I think there are a lot of unexpected entrants to the market. Yes, this also brings the necessity to renew within the industry continuously. How can leaders make the right decisions to make sure that they go towards the future? This is the time to make the decisions that will set the path for the coming years. In terms of mobility, well, yes. We've always said that flexibility is very, very important, but I think it's going to become increasingly important because Róbert also said that mobility is becoming a commodity. It's no longer about the product itself, it's about the mobility service, getting from point A to B. So a leader earlier on thought about mobility in terms of garage spaces, physical infrastructure basically, and a lot of costs and life cycles and amortization periods. And now we have to think about a service, getting from A to B. And I think this is the path that a lot of companies have taken and that companies are still taking. So we need fewer and fewer investments for infrastructure, and perhaps we can use the funds to take or to make use of services. If we talk about mobility, this is what we have to project as leaders. How can we establish this flexibility and how can we maintain this flexibility in the future? What is going to be the drive chain? What is going to be the electricity price? What is going to be the capacity that will be needed? Is there a lockdown, for example? So how can we cost-effectively maintain this flexibility is going to be a very important issue. Actually, you have quite large headcounts at all the companies, and you also have to make decisions in this respect. How can you touch upon this topic, and what useful recommendations can you give to other companies and to other executives? So what we've heard so far is that adaptability is key. We are experiencing such a changing world that we really have to prepare for quick adaptation. I think this is the #1 task, and this is what I can recommend to all fellow executives. And the second thing is the priority role that education plays. In a digital era, automated processes will play a very important role, but I think the knowledge that our colleagues have will be equally important. And this is knowledge that they cannot really acquire in school or universities. Here we need further education and training, and I think this is the point where we leaders have a very important role to play, that we ensure this knowledge and training possibilities to our colleagues, so that there is the possibility and the culture of continuous learning, lifelong learning at our companies. And the third one is a little more complex, and should you have not yet started, you should start now, and that is namely building software competences. I think this is going to be very important in terms of competitiveness. I think there will be very few services in the field of mobility where there is no software component. Without repeating what Robbie has said, I'd like to continue. I'd like to carry on with the software topic towards the direction of digitalization. And I don't think about digital processes or paperless work processes being introduced, but I'm thinking about business model innovation. We have to rethink everything in the company's life, in the company's portfolio, in the company's business model. If there's, for example, a manufacturing unit, and the company has manufacturing lines and physical units and is active in the field of automotive manufacturing, they will not be able to leave out the step of rethinking process, and will not be able to afford not thinking about the data that they use and that they produce, and how they can use this data to make their operations more efficient and more profitable. And I'm only talking about the manufacturing side, and this digital trend is equally applicable to development centers. For 20 to 30 years now, developers have been sitting in front of computers, and yet the software developing center, or this development center, may not be a digitalized one if they just sit in front of the computer, if they don't think about the data that is available to them, or the set of data that they could use. If you think about the optimization of a layout, then we have to think about how we can make use of AI, so as to make sure that the development process takes a lot shorter than traditionally. So these are just two examples that I wanted to bring up to continue the list that Robbie has started. And I think even companies, large companies that are in the front run of digitalization, they too have things to reconsider. If we only look at development and manufacturing, they can still be better prepared for the future challenges, whatever the megatrends that they are working on, or whatever the segment of mobility is that they will make use. I think the past 2 years have also helped bring digitalization into our focus. When we think about this aspect, we've seen plans created for 3 to 5 year time span. This has been changing recently, but if we think about planning, or if we talk about planning, what is the time frame with which we have to calculate in terms of mobility? I think surprisingly soon. Obviously, autonomous cars will not be driving on the roads of Budapest in 2026, but now in 2022 and around 2023-24, we will see an entirely different portfolio of the automotive manufacturers. They will be able to provide solutions that we would have expected only later on, a few years ago. So these developments are ongoing, they're almost ready for the market. If you had asked me in 2008 when smartphone technology will come, we would have said, yeah, 4 years, 6 years, 8 years, but we saw an exponential speeding up. And I think similar is the case with mobility. And we don't really know when these changes will arrive, but I think it will arrive much faster than we think about it, both on manufacturers' side and consumer side. Yes, I'd like to dispute what you've said, because there are already second-level autonomous cars and actually even third-level autonomous cars in certain countries on the roads. If you thought about level 5 autonomous drive, obviously for that we will have to wait. Obviously for those we will have to wait, but we forget, for example, parking assistants that already use those sensors and those systems that we also use for the development of level 5 autonomous driving. So these solutions are present. Yeah, this is why I'm saying it's coming faster than we think about it. Yes, actually so fast that it's already here, but I did understand what you said. Obviously when we talk about autonomous driving, we all think about level 5. And what I've already mentioned in terms of technology called diversity, I think it's going to be, it will take time to find out which technology will win, and it will take time for us to see what level of autonomous driving we will need, the customers will need, what consumers want. And we believe autonomous drive will be there up till level 3 for the everyday drivers, and levels 4, 5 will target other segments, for example, logistics or taxi companies. I think there we will see an exponentially faster arrival. So already today we see materials being moved within manufacturing units by robots. So they are programmed to transport things from A to B on a preset path. They also look at the current state of the manufacturing process, where the final product is to be found. But this is not quite clear to everyday people. So mobility is not necessarily just traveling from A to B. It includes a lot of other things. Yes, a final sentence. If you looked at what we said 5 years ago about the future, we would see that things didn't quite come through the way we thought about it. Not necessarily because of the technology, because the technology is here, it is at our disposal. Actually, as I've said, the companies provide a broader and broader portfolio, but we will see whether these options are accepted by society. If there is greater acceptance on behalf of the society, these will spread sooner. Well, apparently we have come to the end of our time, and I like panels before the lunch break, because by the end everybody pays very eager attention to see when the panel comes to an end. So this is the time when our panel has come to an end. Thank you for the discussion.